Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And earlier this week, Trump had another bit of a rant on Truth Social. It was about the consequences of his own disastrous tariffs this time. He was specifically raging about China blocking the purchase of American soybeans for negotiating purposes. So essentially, Trump is admitting that China holds all the cards. Trump is now having to give billions of US taxes to soybean farmers. And he's presenting this as a good thing. But this is the opposite of foreigners paying for stuff, which is his entire shtick. It's what he does with everything. I'm going to get foreigners to pay for it. This is a situation where foreigners used to pay for something. China used to buy the soybeans. And now American taxpayers are going to pay for them instead. Only they're not going to even get any soybeans out of it. These American taxpayers are not going to get anything out of it at all. They're just paying billions of dollars to stop Trump's failed trade war kicking him in the nutsack. But what chance does Trump actually have of reversing the damage of his ill-advised trade war? Can he come out of this looking like a winner, or has he lost the trade war before his next round of talks with Xi Jinping even begins? But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So, after Trump's disastrous attempt to tackle what he considers unfair trade practices by China. Now, there are a lot of people that do have some genuine concerns with the way China rigs things for their own businesses. And, Trump would have had some support. If he'd have decided instead to form alliances, he could have gone to the EU, for example, the other large market in the world. And he could have said, look, we both have, this common issue with Chinese trade practices, right? Why don't we work together? They'd have been receptive to that. But no, instead, he decided to pick a trade fight with the entire world, including China, with tariffs. As a result, the taco meme was born shortly afterwards. But although Trump walked back his tariff escalation, the US is still paying the price. China used to be a huge importer of US agricultural produce, such as like soybeans and beef. But obviously China applied retaliatory tariffs, so they've now turned to other markets. Indeed, they're buying quite a lot from Brazil now, which has also helped Brazil blunt the 50% tariffs Trump levied on them for actually enforcing their own laws against insurrection. So basically, Trump started a trade war with both Brazil and China. I mean, he started it with the whole world, including an island of sheep and seals, but specifically Brazil and China, the net result of which is crushed export markets for the United States. The price a country pays for putting a moron in charge, and an angry moron at that. And just for top trolling, the absolute cherry on top of this, Trump wasn't even authorised to apply those tariffs which caused the mess in the first place. According to American court cases so far, he's not actually allowed to do it. But Congress, being as weak as piss, let him do it anyway. So Trump is now preparing for trade talks with Xi Jinping in, I think it's about 4 weeks' time. Now, the thing about trade talks is it's actually quite easy to come away with some big win for your supporters. Nobody really follows trade deals closely. They're very boring and incredibly complex. And trade experts who do follow them also tend to be incredibly boring. So all you have to do is amplify the hell out of one concession you've got, and especially if the media are willing to be supportive, you can sell it as a great triumph. And Trump has an especially easy time because he's already sunk trade with China. He's obviously not going to compare what he comes away with how trade was under Biden. He'll compare how it was like a few weeks before. He could come away with something that is still worse than under the previous administration and sell it as not only a win, but something Sleepy Joe could never have managed. Only the complete block on exports to China of entire commodities is a bit of a problem. See, if Trump comes away hailing a win based on some minor little wrinkle in the deal, but China still isn't buying American soybeans or beef or whatever the hell else, he's going to get found out, isn't he? I mean, in 2024, over half of all American soybean exports went to China. Since May of this year, there's been zero exports heading to China. Now, I don't know if the US has been able to boost exports elsewhere, but judging by Trump's latest raging, I'm guessing nowhere near enough to compensate. Hence his announcement that he's providing US taxpayer money to compensate these farmers, billions of dollars. But what's interesting is Trump's statement during his rage fest on the subject that China are not buying soybeans purely for negotiating reasons, he said. Now, there are a few things you could say about this. The first is it might be true. It may well be true. It's certainly based on counter tariffs. And if it is true, you go, so why did China feel the need for this negotiating tactic, Trumpy boy? Why did they do that? Could you just remind us? Was it because you applied politically motivated barriers to Chinese trade and they decided to just hit back? Because that's sort of what happened, isn't it? But I would also say this. Trump desperately needs his statement to be true, but it might not be. China hasn't gone on a soy diet for this negotiating tactic. They've stopped buying various foods from America and they've turned to other markets. Now, I'm not going to try and say that it's all just as it was before for China. There must have been a reason they were buying things from America in the first place, but they seem to be coping. You know, for example, they've gone to Brazil for extra soybeans. So Brazil's soybean exports are now up, as well as some beef, along with Australia. So you think about it this way. As far as I know, China is still importing the food that it was importing before. It's just doing so from other countries. Now, here's the thing. If China are getting things like soybeans and beef at a reasonable price, I mean, there must have been economic reasons why they were buying so much from America before. But nonetheless, if it's okay for them, what then? Because Trump might be making an assumption here that all he has to do is carry out another art of the deal masterclass and China will start buying those soybeans again. What if they don't? What if, economically speaking, their new trade with Brazil works out well enough for them? Because let's be honest, China gets on with Brazil politically way better than the United States, regardless of who is president of either country. China may see it, even if, you know, they're having to pay a little bit extra for those soybeans. I don't know if they are or they're not. But if they are, maybe it's worth it for that closer political link and to help cut America out. It may well be that the change of supply chains doesn't suit China quite as well as before. I mean, maybe if Trump can come to some arrangement with Xi Jinping, China will reduce tariffs on soybeans from the USA and resume at least some purchases again. But what if that still isn't enough to go back to the pre-Trump levels of exports for American farmers? Or worse for Trump, what if he isn't able to get China to budge at all? Because what I see right now is Trump raging at the consequences of his own trade policy. I'm not seeing Xi whining like a bitch, am I? The Chinese government is at least giving the impression of carrying on as normal. Yes, you know, a disruption to supply chains means that China will be hit as well a little bit, but it's not giving the impression it really desperately cares. It's the US government which is getting excited here. In fact, I'd suggest Trump has basically just told China that he is desperate for them to resume trade in soybeans specifically from American farmers. Oh, really? How desperate, Chinese negotiators will be saying. What will you give us in return for dropping tariffs again? Art of the deal, my arse. Trump has basically just paraded. He's just shouted through a megaphone his major vulnerability in these trade talks. He has let China know that he is desperate to get sales of soybeans specifically moving again. China will use that to strike a very hard bargain. The only thing in Trump's favour is that if China was buying soybeans from the USA at the start of the year, it must have been a good arrangement for them. Because they could have been buying them from Brazil or wherever the hell else last year. Why didn't they? If they could get the same elsewhere for the same price just as easily, they would have been doing that for years. After all, we know that China has spent a decade diversifying markets to be less reliant on the US, preparing for just such a trade war. But I find no evidence that China are in any way suffering political problems from this disruption to trade. And in fact, they may think that any trade they can do without, as far as America is concerned, is good news for them. Because if they can, even if it is slightly higher price, if they can import from elsewhere and cut America out, but America can't do the same in return, that's a net win for China. In terms of this geopolitical rearrangement that Trump has basically started. This could be a serious blow to Trump. He can compensate soybean farmers in the short term by telling the American taxpayers who are paying for it without even getting any beans in return, that it's just to shore up the trade talks and the funds will be repaid with better trade in the long term. But if Trump comes back from the talks empty-handed, or worse still, having to give away massive concessions elsewhere, what then? China have Trump over a barrel here. Not for the first time, Trump is humiliating the United States in the eyes of the world. What's going to be left of the premium superpower by the end of this? But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.